To the family gathered around the festival table, it wasn't just raw fish, it was koi pla, a dish of celebration. A recipe passed down for generations. It was delicious. Hidden inside the glistening, minced flesh of that morning's catch were hundreds of microscopic, invisible hitchhikers. Somsak ate 2 helpings. He drove home full, happy, and completely unaware that the meal had just started a clock, one that would run in silence for 14 years. This is Clinical Archives. Names have been changed for privacy. This story is based on true events and documented medical cases. His name is Somsak Phongsavat, 41 years old at the time he ate that meal, a schoolteacher in a province where the river is the road, the larder, and the church all at once. He was not careless. That is the part that matters. He boiled his drinking water. He washed his hands. When his own children had stomach trouble, he was the one who knew to push fluids and watch for fever. He understood, in the practical way a careful rural man understands, that water carries sickness. What he did not understand, what almost no one outside a handful of laboratories understood well enough to stop it, was that the danger at that festival was not in the water. It was in the fish, and cooking would have killed it, and freezing it for a few days would have killed it, and he did neither. Because the whole point of koi pla is that it is raw. The precaution that would have saved his life was not a precaution anyone in the room thought they needed. Here is the thing that had already begun. The parasite is called Opisthorchis viverrini, the Southeast Asian liver fluke. A flatworm, when it grows up, barely a centimeter long, the size of a small seed, flat and pale and shaped a little like a leaf. It is not dramatic to look at. It has no hooks for tearing, no drill, no menace you could photograph and put on a poster. It has 2 suckers, one at the mouth and one underneath, and it uses them to hold on. That is most of what it does. It holds on, and it waits, and it lives. And it was never supposed to end up in Somsak. The fluke's name comes from viverrini, after the civet, the small cat-like animal it was first found in more than a century ago. Its world is built around fish eating mammals, cats, dogs, civets, rats along the water. They eat infected fish. The fluke matures in their bile ducts. The eggs wash back into the river, and the cycle turns. A human being is, from the worm's point of view, just another fish-eating mammal that wandered into the story. It cannot tell the difference. It settles into a human liver as readily as a cat's, and that is precisely the problem. Because a human can carry it, quietly, for 20 years. That cycle needs more than a fish to keep turning, and the way it completes itself is its own small horror. The adult fluke, living in a liver, lays eggs that leave the body in waste. Those eggs wash into ponds and slow river shallows, and there they are eaten by a particular kind of tiny snail, the Bithynia snail, no bigger than a fingernail. Inside the snail, the parasite multiplies and changes form, then releases free-swimming larvae back into the water. Those larvae find the carp, burrow into the muscle, and wait to be scooped up for the next celebration. Snail, fish, mammal, break any one link, and the chain dies. But in a warm, slow river ringed by villages and free-roaming animals, all 3 links sit within a few meters of each other, and the chain never breaks. To understand what those 20 years do to a person, you have to follow the worm to where it goes. Once Somsak swallowed the larvae hidden in the flesh of that minced carp, they did not stay in his stomach. They traveled up. The bile duct is the narrow plumbing that drains bile from the liver into the gut, chol from the Greek for bile, angio for vessel, carcinoma for the thing we are slowly building toward. The young flukes swam up that drainage system, against the current, into the fine branching ducts deep inside the liver, and there they stopped. They anchored. They began, in the most ordinary way imaginable, to feed. He felt none of it. This is not unusual. It is the rule. In documented cases, the early years of infection are silent or nearly so, a vagefulness, a little fatigue. Nothing a busy man would carry to a doctor. The flukes, often dozens of them, sometimes hundreds in a heavy infection, fanned out through the ducts and lived their flat, patient lives. And still, the host gets up and teaches school and eats another celebratory meal the next season. And the season after that. That last part is the engine of the whole tragedy, and it is worth slowing down for. Because here is what most people get wrong about a story like this. They imagine one bad meal, one unlucky bite. That is not how this kills. A single infection, caught early, is almost nothing, and we will get to why. What grinds a liver toward cancer is the repetition. Somsak did not eat koipla once. He ate it the way you might have a favorite meal at every holiday of your life, at weddings, at funerals, at the new year, whenever the catch was good. Each meal topped up the colony. Cure or no cure, the bile ducts were under near permanent occupation for over a decade. It is a lifetime of small invasions, not one dramatic bite, that does the damage. And the damage works like this. The fluke is not poisoning him, exactly, it is irritating him, constantly, for years. Picture a splinter you can never remove, except this splinter is alive, and it moves, and there are hundreds of them. Each adult worm clings to the delicate lining of a bile duct with its two suckers, and as it feeds and shifts, it scrapes that lining raw. It secretes, too, waste, enzymes, a stream of molecule science is still cataloging directly onto the tissue. The body responds the only way it knows how. It inflames. It floods the area with immune cells. It tries to wall off and destroy a thing it cannot reach, and in the crossfire, it burns its own tissue instead. Slow motion, friendly fire, repeated for 20 years. Now add the part that turns injury into cancer. Every time that lining is scraped and scorched, the duct is ordered to repair it, to grow new cells, to patch the wound, to replace what was lost. Cell division is a copy operation, and every copy carries a small chance of error. Do it once, the odds of a dangerous mistake are almost nothing. Force the same tissue to divide and repair, over and over, under a constant chemical assault from the worm's secretions, and you are running that copy operation millions of extra times. The worm's own products appear to push those cells toward dividing abnormally on top of it. Multiply a tiny chance of error by 2 decades of forced repair, and the odds stop being tiny. One cell, somewhere in that branching plumbing, finally copies itself wrong in the way that matters, and does not stop. This is why the World Health Organization's Cancer Agency rates this fluke a Group 1 carcinogen, a definite cause of cancer in humans. Not possible, not probable, the same top tier as tobacco and asbestos, a worm the size of a seed, sharing a shelf with cigarettes. It has company on that shelf, and the company is worth a glance, because it tells you this is a pattern and not a fluke, forgive the word. Out of every parasite humanity knows, only 3 are classified as definite causes of human cancer, and 2 of them are liver flukes. The first is this one, Opisthorchis. The second is its near twin, the Chinese liver fluke, Cholangiocarcinoma sinensis. Same kind of worm, same raw fish route, same bile duct cancer at the end of it, and we will come back to it. The third is a different creature entirely, a blood fluke you don't eat at all. You catch it from a single swim in the wrong freshwater lake, and over years its eggs lodge in the bladder wall and drive bladder cancer the same slow way. 3 worms, 2 organs. The same chilling blueprint, a quiet tenet that rewrites your cells while you forget it is there. For years, Somsak forgot. There was nothing to remember. When the first real trouble came, it came disguised. A dull ache under the right ribs. He thought he had pulled something. Then indigestion that wouldn't settle, and a tiredness he blamed on his age and his hours. When he finally saw a doctor, the most natural guess in the world was gallstones. The pain sits in the right place, the discomfort fits, and gallstones are common, while liver flukes, to most physicians, are a paragraph in a textbook they read once. In documented cases elsewhere, surgeons have opened patients fully expecting stones, found none, and discovered the ducts lined with flukes instead. The system was not stupid. It was pointing, confidently, at the most likely answer. It just wasn't looking for a worm, because almost nobody outside the endemic zone is. And now we reach the part of this story that should genuinely frighten you, because it is the part no amount of being careful can fix on your own. There was a window, a long one, the better part of 2 decades, in which Somsak could have been cured for the price of a bus ticket. The treatment is praziquantel, a single course of cheap tablets that clears the worms reliably when the infection is found in time. It existed the entire time he was sick, It sat on pharmacy shelves a few hours' drive away during every one of those silent years. The drug was never the problem. The problem is that the window to use it falls in the exact stretch when the patient feels completely fine and has no reason to walk into a clinic. The disease's defining trick is that its two alarms, the body's and the laboratories, both stay silent through the only years when catching it would matter, by the time your body finally rings the bell. The bell is ringing for something the tablet can no longer touch, and the laboratory's silence is its own quiet scandal. There is no commercial blood test for this fluke in much of the Western world. A stool test can find eggs while the worms are actively laying, but run that test on a man whose exposure was decades ago, past the worm's own lifespan, and it comes back clean. Even once cancer appears, no routine test can stand over the tumor and prove the fluke put it there. The one piece of evidence that would close the case has usually left the building before anyone thinks to look for it. So picture the trap from inside. For years, the test would have been positive, but no one orders a test on a healthy man. By the time the man is sick enough to test, the test is negative. The cure works only while you feel well. The diagnosis arrives only once you're past saving. Every door is open at exactly the moment you have no reason to walk through it, and locked the moment you do. For Somsak, the silence broke the way it almost always breaks in these cases, late and all at once. The whites of his eyes turned yellow. Jaundice, jaune, the French for yellow, the sign of a liver whose drainage is failing, bile backing up into the blood and staining the skin and the eyes. An itch he couldn't scratch out of his arms. Weight falling off him for no reason he could name, by the time he sat in a hospital in the city. The imaging told the story his body had been hiding for 14 years, and the story was this. By the time they found it, his liver weighed nearly twice what a healthy liver should. The extra weight was worms, hundreds of them, threaded through ducts so swollen and scarred the radiologist could trace the damage from across the room. A healthy liver is smooth and deep red. His was pale, knotted, and crowded with the slow work of 14 years. Cholangiocarcinoma, bile duct cancer. The end of the road the fluke had been paving since the festival. It is often found, as it was found in him, when there are months left rather than years. The single tablet that would have cleared the worms in an afternoon a decade earlier could do nothing now. There is no praziquantel for a tumor. The reveal did not come from a scan catching it early. It came, far too late, from a specialist finally asking the oldest question in medicine, and the one no form had ever put to him: what, over the years, did you eat? If this were one unlucky man on one bend of one river, it would be a tragedy and not a warning. It is a warning. Northeast Thailand's Khon Kaen region records the highest rate of bile duct cancer found anywhere on Earth. Not highest. In some districts, the disease is so common that nearly every family has lost someone to it, and the local hospitals have built entire surgical programs around a cancer that most of the world's doctors will never see once. Roughly 8 million people are estimated to carry this fluke in Thailand alone, and more than 600 million people live at risk across the wider region where the dish and the parasite overlap. Researchers there have spent 50 years trying to break the chain, and the story of that failure is almost as instructive as the disease. They have dewormed whole villages, handing out praziquantel by the thousand, and watched the infection rates climb right back the next year, because the people took the cure and then returned to the same table and ate the same dish. They have run school programs, posters, radio campaigns, sermons. One Khon Kaen scientist reduced the entire problem to a single sentence: stop eating it raw. It is the easiest thing in the world to do, and for half a century it has not worked. Because the ask is not really about food safety. You are not asking people to quit a poison, you are asking them to quit a wedding. To quit the dish their grandparents served, the taste of every good day they can remember, on the strength of a danger they cannot feel, and a statistic that is always, in their minds, about somebody else. A cure you can hand out in an afternoon means nothing against a habit stitched into a culture's idea of joy. The worm has cousins too, and they widen the map far past one river. In the cold rivers of Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan, a close relative called the cat liver fluke moves through raw and lightly salted freshwater fish, infecting millions who have never heard the word fluke. And then there's the one I promised we'd return to, the Chinese liver fluke, Cholangiocarcinoma sinensis, working its way through China, Korea, and northern Vietnam by the very same raw fish route, carrying the very same Group 1 stamp and the very same bile duct cancer at the end. Between them, these relatives put tens of millions more people inside the danger belt, most of them with no idea that a flatworm could be the thing that one day kills them. And then there is the group nobody saw coming. To find them, you have to leave Asia entirely and look in American towns, at men in their 70s and 80s, decades and an ocean away from any river in Laos. They were soldiers. American troops fought for years in and around the Mekong Delta, and they ate what was there. When the rations ran short, or a village shared a meal, or the moment simply called for it, some of them ate the river fish, raw, undercooked, the same carp carrying the same larvae. They came home, they raised families, took jobs, grew old. And inside an unknown number of them, the fluke settled into the bile ducts and began the same 20-year work it had done in Samsak, on a clock that started in a war most of the country had stopped thinking about. Consider one of them, a composite of the cases that have surfaced. A veteran, home for 40 years, healthy as far as anyone knew, who walks into a VA clinic in his 70s with yellowing eyes and weight falling off him. The diagnosis is bile duct cancer, a disease his American doctors associate with almost nothing in his history, until someone, finally, asks about the war and about the fish. A VA pilot study that tested veterans who recalled eating raw fish in country found that roughly 1 in 5 still carried the parasite decades later. Hundreds of veterans have since turned up with this exact cancer. And here the failure compounds into something that should make you angry. The reporting around those cases describes the great majority of their disability claims being denied. Many of the men arguing the link should be presumed an automatic, the way Agent Orange claims eventually became, and many of them not living long enough to see the argument settled. They survived the war and were killed half a century later by a meal. The same blind spot lands on immigrant and refugee communities who carried the flukes with them when they resettled. Hundreds of thousands of Southeast Asian refugees are estimated to carry liver flukes, at rates that in some studies reach as high as 1 in 4, while many of the doctors they now see have never once heard of the risk, and so never ask the question that would catch it. So here is the glitch, said plainly. The fish in your supermarket pass through an inspection system built to catch exactly this. The fish minced on a wooden board at a village festival passed through nothing but the morning's catch and a sharp knife. The cure that could have ended all of it cost almost nothing and sat within reach for the entire 20 years the worm was working. And the two alarms that should have gone off, the one in his body, the one in the lab, both stayed silent straight through the only years that mattered. That is not bad luck layered on bad luck. That is the disease functioning exactly as designed, patient, painless, and invisible until the damage is permanent. If you take one thing from Samsak, take this. The fix was never complicated. Freeze the fish for a few days, or cook it through, and the carcinogen on your plate becomes dinner. The danger isn't the river or the recipe. It's the silence, the years when nothing hurts and no test will speak, and the only thing standing between a man and a cure is a question nobody thought to ask in time. The next time someone hands you something raw from fresh water, at a celebration, at a roadside stall, at a table where everyone insists it's always been safe, remember the two suckers, the seed-sized worm on the shelf beside the cigarettes, the 20 quiet years. And remember that the test won't warn you, and your own body won't either, so the asking is on you. This is Clinical Archives. Until the next case.